streets of Tanzania have become a battlefield this Wednesday, as thousands of Tanzanians pour into the roads to reject what they're calling a sham election, one where President Samia Suluhu Hassan is quite literally running against herself. The smoke rising from burning polling stations and the echo of tear gas canisters tell a story that official government channels are desperately trying to silence. Tanzania is rejecting a coronation dressed up as democracy. As I report this, the internet across Tanzania has been throttled into near silence. NetBlocks, the International Internet Monitoring Organization, confirmed what millions of Tanzanians woke up to find. Their digital connection to the outside world severed, their ability to share what's happening on their streets cut off. But the images that managed to escape before the blackout tell a powerful story. Young Tanzanians hurling rocks at security forces, a petrol station engulfed in flames, and massive crowds marching with a defiance that refuses to be extinguished. Hundreds of protesters were seen marching toward the Salanda Bridge, the symbolic gateway to Dar es Salaam's city centre. Their chants echoing a simple message that has become the rallying cry of this uprising: Haki yetu, our rights, tunataka demokrasia, we want democracy. Witnesses on the ground, speaking on condition of anonymity for fear of the reprisals that have become all too common under Hassan's increasingly iron-fisted rule, report violent clashes erupting in at least 4 neighbourhoods across Tanzania's economic capital. BBC Swahili footage shows police unleashing tear gas on crowds, the acrid smoke mixing with the anger and frustration of a people who feel their voice has been stolen. What makes this moment so explosive, so fundamentally unacceptable to ordinary Tanzanians, is the brazen manner in which their choices have been eliminated. Chadema, the country's leading opposition party, has been barred from participating. Their presidential candidate, the courageous Tundu Lissu, a man who survived an assassination attempt in 2017 when unknown gunmen pumped 16 bullets into his body, now sits in a courtroom facing treason charges he vehemently denies. The timing is no coincidence. The charges are no coincidence. This is the playbook of a leader terrified of competition. In April, Tanzania's Electoral Commission disqualified Chadema entirely after the party refused to sign what they termed a restrictive electoral code of conduct, a document designed, opposition figures say, to silence dissent before it could even reach the ballot box. Then came the disqualification of Luhaga Mpina, the presidential candidate from ACT Wazalendo, Tanzania's second largest opposition party. The grounds: an objection from Hassan's own Attorney General, no credible opposition, no real contest, no democracy. Deogratius Munishi, Chadema's Secretary for Foreign Affairs, captured the absurdity perfectly when he told Citizen Television in Kenya, "There is no election in Tanzania. If I may sum up properly, it is a coronation." His words have become a hashtag, a meme, a battle cry for protesters who refuse to legitimize this charade with their silence. To understand what's happening in Tanzania today, we must confront an uncomfortable question. What is President Samia Suluhu Hassan so desperately afraid of that she would risk burning down the very legitimacy of her rule? When Hassan ascended to power in March 2021 following the death of her predecessor John Magufuli, there was cautious optimism across East Africa. Here was a woman leader, only the second female head of state on our continent, who initially signalled a break from Magufuli's suffocating authoritarianism.
If you want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start, check out Base 44.
She lifted bans on opposition rallies. She reopened spaces for media that had been shuttered. She spoke of dialogue and reconciliation. The international community breathed a sigh of relief and showered her with praise. But that was before she tasted power. That was before she realised just how fragile her hold on the presidency might be in a genuinely free and fair election. That was before she understood that the people of Tanzania, having glimpsed the possibility of change, might actually choose it. Over the past 2 years, Hassan has systematically dismantled the very reforms that earned her international credibility. The abductions began quietly at first. An opposition activist here, a critical journalist there. Families would wake to find loved ones missing, taken in the dead of night by men in unmarked vehicles. Police would claim ignorance. Government spokespeople would deny everything, but the bodies of evidence kept mounting, and so did the terror. Just this month, fierce government critic was dragged from his home by unknown assailants. His family's anguished pleas for information have been met with the now familiar official response: "We are investigating." It's a phrase that has become synonymous with impunity, a bureaucratic smokescreen for state-sanctioned intimidation. This is what fear looks like when it wears the mask of authority. Hassan knows that in a fair fight, with Tundu Lissu on the campaign trail, with Chadema mobilising the youth who feel betrayed by CCM's decades of broken promises, with Act Wazalendo offering a genuine alternative vision, she might lose. And for someone who has grown accustomed to the trappings of State House, who has surrounded herself with advisors who whisper only what she wants to hear, who has watched opposition figures bend and break under pressure, that possibility is intolerable. So she has done what every authoritarian does when popularity fails. She has rigged the game, disqualify the opponents, silence the critics, control the narrative. And when the people rise up to say enough, cut off their internet and send in the police with tear gas and batons. Despite the communication blackout, the voices of Tanzanian protesters have found ways to reach us. Through satellite connections, through courageous journalists risking arrest, through diaspora networks that refuse to let their homeland struggle be forgotten, we're hearing what ordinary Tanzanians are saying, and it's powerful. "We would rather die standing than live kneeling," one young protester told me via a crackling voice call before the line went dead. Samia thinks we are fools. She thinks we will accept this theatre. But we are the children of Nyerere, and Nyerere taught us that freedom is not given, it is taken. Another protester, a university student who managed to send a text message through creative routings, wrote, "They can shut down the internet, but they cannot shut down our voices. They can disqualify our candidates, but they cannot disqualify our will. We are millions and we are tired of being told to wait, to be patient, to accept crumbs from the table of CCM. This is our country too." At a burned polling station in one of Dar es Salaam's townships, witnesses reported seeing spray-painted messages that read, "No opposition equals no vote," and "Samia equals dictator." These aren't the slogans of people seeking reform. These are the declarations of a population demanding transformation. As a Pan-Africanist watching this unfold, I cannot help but reflect on the bitter irony of this moment. The Chama cha Mapinduzi, the party of the revolution, was born from the liberation struggle that freed Tanzania from colonial rule. Its predecessor, the Tanganyika African National Union, led by the revered Julius Nyerere, fought for the dignity and self-determination of the Tanzanian people. Nyerere's philosophy of Ujamaa, African socialism rooted in familyhood and collective responsibility, inspired a generation of African leaders. But what has CCM become? Since its founding in 1977 through the merger of mainland Tanzania's TANU and Zanzibar's Afro-Shirazi Party, it has held power continuously for 48 years. Nearly 5 decades without genuine alternation of power. Nearly 5 decades of the same party controlling every lever of state authority. Nearly 5 decades during which the revolutionary ideals of Nyerere have calcified into the self-preserving instincts of a political class that confuses the party with the nation itself. This is the tragedy of so many liberation movements across our continent. The ANC in South Africa, ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, the MPLA in Angola, parties that won freedom for their people, but then became the new oppressors, unable or unwilling to accept that true democracy requires the possibility of losing power. Hassan, for all her early promises, has revealed herself to be just another guardian of this ossified order, willing to destroy democratic institutions to maintain CCM's monopoly on power. As night falls over Dar es Salaam, the most pressing question remains maddeningly unclear. How long will these protests last? Will they have the strength and endurance to actually force Samia Suluhu Hassan from power? Or will they be crushed under the boot of state security forces as so many African uprisings have been? The honest answer is that nobody knows. Not the protesters themselves, not the embattled government, not the regional observers watching nervously from Nairobi and Kampala and Kigali. What we do know is that spontaneous urban uprisings are notoriously difficult to predict. They can fizzle within days when confronted with overwhelming force and exhaustion. Or they can metastasize into sustained movements that topple governments. We saw it in Sudan in 2019, in Burkina Faso in 2014, during the Arab Spring that swept across North Africa. The internet blackout is both a sign of government panic and a dangerous escalation. By cutting communications, Hassan's administration hopes to prevent coordination among protesters and stop images of state violence from reaching international audiences. But this same tactic can backfire spectacularly. It enrages people further, validates their belief that they're fighting a regime with something to hide, and creates an information vacuum that can be filled with even more radical organizing when connections are stored. The burning of polling stations is significant. It represents a complete rejection of this electoral process's legitimacy. When people are willing to destroy the infrastructure of voting itself, they're saying they'd rather have no election than a fraudulent one. This is dangerous territory for Hassan because it means protesters aren't asking for reforms or concessions. They're demanding she step aside entirely. Whether this movement can sustain itself depends on several factors that remain in flux. Can opposition parties like Chadema and Act Wazalendo, despite their official disqualification, provide organisational backbone to what is currently a leaderless uprising? Will Tanzania's military, historically more restrained than security forces in some neighbouring countries, remain loyal to Hassan if ordered to fire on large crowds? Will regional bodies like the East African Community or the African Union apply sufficient pressure to force negotiations? Will the international community, which invested diplomatic capital in praising Hassan's early reforms, now hold her accountable for this authoritarian backsliding? And perhaps most critically, are ordinary Tanzanians angry enough, organised enough and brave enough to keep coming back to the streets day after day, even as the tear gas burns their eyes and the batons break their bones? What is unfolding in Tanzania is more than a disputed election. It is a fundamental crisis of legitimacy that will define this nation's trajectory for decades to come. Samia Suluhu Hassan came to power promising a new chapter, but she is writing a very old story. The story of African leaders who cannot imagine relinquishing power, who see the state as their property rather than a public trust, who believe their rule is so essential that democracy itself must be sacrificed to preserve it. But standing against that old story is a new generation of Tanzanians who refuse to accept it. They've watched their Kenyan neighbours protest and force concessions from their government. They've seen their Sudanese brothers and sisters topple a dictator. They know that change is possible when people decide they've had enough. As Tanzania burns and the internet stays dark, the question isn't whether Samia Suluhu Hassan is afraid. Her actions have already answered that. The question is whether the people's fear of continued oppression will prove stronger than the government's capacity for repression. That answer will be written in the streets of Dar es Salaam, Mwanza, Arusha, and every town where Tanzanians decide between submission and resistance.
Watu mnakaa hivi bala mtoke nje, tokeni. Nacheka ila naogopa. That's it.
CCM mmekataliwa, CCM mmekataliwa leo. Yani vituo vyote, kini kituo cha 6 tunateketeza mama.
Acheni kukaa nyumbani vijana, sogeni barabarani muandamane kwa ajili ya nchi yenu. Acheni uoga, watu wako barabarani.
The struggle continues. The outcome remains uncertain.